And I think there's also, this is where I do the vast majority of my Zoom calls, right? So it's just another conversation. And that's something where it helps, especially post-COVID, where we're all used to doing Zoom calls, right? People are much more comfortable jumping on a conversation and realizing that podcasts aren't, if this is not 60 minutes, this is not a gotcha interview. Really, it's just a discussion.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Tom Schwab is recognized as the godfather of podcast interview marketing and is dedicated to helping thought leaders amplify their voices through targeted podcast guesting. He authored Podcast Guest Profits, How to Grow Your Business with a Targeted Interview Strategy, advocating for marketing that focuses on genuine connections, effective communication, and empathy. Tom's approach particularly highlights how introverts can thrive in what is often seen as an extroverted field by choosing the right platforms for engagement. Listen to today's episode so you can learn from Tom how to leverage podcast guesting as a strategic tool for authentic marketing that aligns with your strengths and personality. So Tom, welcome to the show.
Candy, I am thrilled to be here.
I am looking forward to this topic. I myself, as I said, am an introvert and never thought I would ever even have a podcast or guest on podcasts. I've done both now too, but I'm looking forward to the conversation. But before I get into questions on the topic I have for you, I'd love for you just to start by sharing what led you to become known as the godfather of podcast interview marketing, and how did you discover the podcast guesting as a tool for business growth?
Well, I was going to say, sometimes when they call you the godfather of something, it means you have gray hair. So it only makes sense looking back in the rearview mirror, right? I was an engineer out of college. My first job was running nuclear power plants in the Navy. And that really taught me the systems, the processes that we use in business. Then I went on, and my last company was HubSpot's first e-commerce case study. And that showed me how to use new media, how to create, engage, and delight customers with content. And along the way, I also went back and grabbed an MBA, right? Spent way too much time and money only to find out marketing is starting a conversation with someone that could be a great client. And so that really brings us to where we are now and where we started 10 years ago, where I hypothesized that you could use podcast interviews much like we used to use guest blogging, right? To tap into an existing audience, much like we used to use, as seen on TV or as seen on radio, or even, talking at the local Kiwanis Club, right? Tapping into that audience. So we tested it. And for the first few years, when I would give my elevator pitch, people would say, "What's a podcast?"
Oh.
Well, we started a little bit early and gave us a lot of data and the foundation. And then about 2019, it really started to take off, and people saw it as a marketing channel, right? It's not just about podcast guesting. That's an ego thing. Podcast interview marketing is how you can, tap into other people's audiences and turn their listeners into your leads and your clients. So that's what we'll talk about today. And I'm always excited by what we're learning. And I think today with AI, it's even more powerful because it's come up in the last few weeks where AI is showing where they get sources, and long form collaborative content, just like this, is what they're pulling from.
Interesting. Well, I do know that you have said you advocate for marketing based on genuine connections and empathy. Makes sense, right? A lot of times people don't do that though, too. But I would love to know then, how does this approach play out in podcast guesting, and why is it key to building authentic relationships with your audience?
Yeah. Nobody wants to go through a funnel, right? It just kills me when I hear people say, oh, you're one funnel away. Nothing
Mm,
good in life has ever come through a funnel. It comes through a conversation. And I think too often we're taught, maybe lied to, that what works on a small transaction will ramp up. And a
mm,
lot of times it's, platforms that are selling you the software to do it too, right? That, well, you can build the funnels and you can grow your business just like Brendan Bouchard did. Well, they forget to put out that Brendan Bouchard and Tony Robbins have been talking to people for decades, right?
mhm,
Then they can start to use that. And so I think that human connection now is something that people are looking for. And so many times we can figure out, oh, this looks like AI or this looks spammy, and people start turning it off. And they're looking for things that are really inhuman. And I'm going to
mhm,
say even the search engines, right? AI is looking at collaborative content because they know that Candy and I are talking together, and they
mm,
know that it's not perfect English coming out of Tom's mouth, right? He talks in broken sentences, says, and people realize real quick, oh, that's really a human. And I think that's important for people to engage with you because, we're humans buy from humans. Maybe it's not B to C or B to B. It's always been human to human.
mhm. So what you're saying is I don't have to worry about if I mess up when I am doing the podcast because then it's seen as real.
If you didn't mess up,
Mhm,
people would probably say something's wrong with that. I remember,
mhm,
a while back we were hiring, and I've got a great team, 22 people, all remote, and they flagged a bunch of the resumes or a bunch of the answers and said, no, these people, they used, AI and chat GPT on it. And I was like,
mm,
how do you know that? And they're like, nobody knows how to use semicolons perfectly
uh,
like that. And it was one of those things where it's like, they got thrown out just because of that. People want humans. And
mhm,
I've even seen people talk about intentionally putting a typo in an email. So people think, oh, it really did come from you.
mhm. Yeah, I've heard that too. I'm a perfectionist also. I've had to like let that go a little bit, but even in school, like I had to have all A's or I was really disappointed with myself. And so with the writing and emailing and stuff too, I always go back and double check. I make sure I add that comma or things like that. But now I'm hearing maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should let it go. So,
Well, my team used to
uh,
joke that if there wasn't a typo or a grammatical error in an email, from me, it was a phishing email. Now,
mm,
I'm an engineer by degree, and so they just expected that. But today now with the tools and stuff, it's easier. But I still
mhm,
can communicate best through speaking, and I think that's a great thing today. That you know, there's a lot of problems in the world, but there's
mhm,
no better time to be alive, right? You can speak and then repurpose it into other content, right? For us
mhm,
introverts, we don't have to jump on a plane, fly someplace, and then stand on a stage and give a keynote. No, we can
mhm.
host our own podcast. We can guest on other people's podcasts, and we don't have to leave the comfort of our own home or office.
Right. Well, I know a lot of people have seen podcast guesting as an extroverted activity. So, as someone who helps introverts thrive in this space, what strategies can they use to make their voice impactful and succeed in an environment that's often perceived as extroverted?
Yeah, I'm going to push back on that premise of that, right? The idea that the extroverts win on podcasts, the data doesn't show that, right? The
Mm,
days of that carnival barker extrovert that's just making noise and drawing the crowds, that doesn't work anymore. If anything,
mm,
it draws people or drives people away. And we've been doing this now for 10 years. And as we looked back at some of our most successful clients and interviewed them and talked with them, we found out that the vast majority of them were introverts, which
mhm,
was interesting. And a gentleman by the name of Matthew Pollard, who wrote a book called The Introvert's Edge, really helped me understand this. And great book, great man. But he talks about that introverts are better on one-on-one
mhm,
conversations,
mhm,
just like we're doing now. They prepare more. they've thought through the things. And I think that's what makes a great podcast guest, right? There's certain people, well, we see them on discovery calls. They don't even end up working with us, but you ask them that one question, so tell me about yourself. And 45 minutes later, that's the end of the podcast. That's not a good podcast. That's not what people like. They want a thoughtful conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, even while you were talking, I was thinking too that I have always enjoyed just the one-on-one conversations too. And I do enjoy doing the podcast and interviewing people and having those conversations. And when I am the most like uncomfortable is walking into a room of people I don't know, right? And then feeling I have to try to talk to someone and, doing that. But I don't have a problem having this conversation like we're having right now. I don't feel like there's pressure or anything like that too. So I think that's maybe why a lot of us who are introverts actually are doing this, whether we're podcasting ourselves or we're guesting on other podcasts, because it really is an easier conversation than trying to like figure out a large room of people, right?
Yeah. And I've even done, radio and television, and that's intimidating to me because it's a different place, different setup. It's not home. Whereas when you're doing a podcast or a podcast interview marketing, here I am sitting in my home, right? It's my office, but it's in my home. I've got all my stuff around me. The microphone is set up just the way I like. And I think this is where I do the vast majority of my Zoom calls, right? So it's just another conversation. And that's something where it helps, especially post-COVID, where we're all used to doing Zoom calls, right? People are much more comfortable jumping on a conversation and realizing that podcasts aren't, if this is not 60 minutes, this is not a gotcha interview. Really, it's just a discussion.
Right. Exactly. So then how can introverted entrepreneurs leverage their natural strengths when participating as podcast guests to maximize their impact?
Great. And I always say you want to be competing where you've got an advantage, right? So I'm 5'8", and I've got a vertical jump of about 3 inches, right? I am not going to compete in basketball because I can't win there. So I think the same way as an introvert, I am not going to try competing at networking, at staying out late, at the conferences, even, keynote speaking. I've done it, but it takes a lot of energy. I'm going to compete where I can win. And so where my strengths are with the one-on-one conversations at podcasts, sharing my expertise there. And at times I struggle with that because, I think the vast majority of us are, I call them humble heroes, right? The world is filled right now with influencers and experts and gurus, right? There are the AI gurus that can't spell AI, but they're all over. And so a lot of times, the introverts, the humble heroes, are the ones that like, well, I don't know that I want to go out there. And a friend of mine helped me with this. He's a lawyer, and he said the definition of an expert is someone that knows more by their training, their experience, their life than the average person, right? So am I the one undisputed expert? No, but I have expertise. And it's interesting because if you look at, what we know can help other people, right? So to the person that is trying to figure out second grade math, they want to learn from the person that has figured out fourth grade math. If you gave them a PhD in mathematics, it'd be useless to them because it wouldn't be helpful, right? It's so far beyond there. So I think we've all got something to share with that. And sometimes it's just, I'm speaking for myself, the courage to get out there. I listened to a gentleman the other day, I believe it was Rick Stevens. He's a big advertising guy in Silicon Valley. And I loved what he said. He said, God hates a coward and the market just ignores them. And so at times I have to remind myself, I need to go out there because, I've been blessed here. I'm blessed to be a blessing. And, I can't let somebody that's just more extroverted or louder, try to help people, right? Because they're probably going to hurt them, right? So I look at that as I've got an obligation to share what I know.
Well, even while you were talking about, a second grade, math problem, you could be a fourth, have accomplished fourth grade. You don't have to be this PhD or something. And I think a lot of times we are comparing ourselves to other people and saying, well, I'm not as good as them, so I'm not going to be as great at, guesting or sharing my information or whatever. And like you said, you don't have to be so far ahead. You just have to be able to help the people that you have a passion to help, right? And not judge yourself against someone else who isn't in the same league as you, and you don't have to be in the same league with them, right? And so I think that was great information that you shared on that too.
Candy, one of my favorite sayings is what's ordinary to you is amazing to others, because we often underestimate what we know and overestimate what other people know, right? And I was reminded this, a friend of mine's a brain surgeon, right? He literally does surgery on people's brains. And we were at a party and he was talking to an electrician and was totally amazed on how you wired all this stuff together. Right. And the other person found out what he did and was totally amazed. So we all have our zone of genius that we can help people with. And, I used to be able to say, well, who can I help from Kalamazoo, Michigan? Right. Now it's with the technology and the tools we have, it's easier to impact the world. And really, when you impact the world, you're also building your brand and your business.
Well, I think that's why I have my podcast too, is like I've said, my passion is really to help entrepreneurs be successful. I've seen, too many fail because they didn't know what they didn't know. And so, my industry, we're bookkeeping and payroll and sales tax and like all the compliance, but I don't want to just talk to people about the finance part of their business, because yes, that's important, but there are so many other things in their business that can impact them too and cause them, not to be successful, right? And so that's the passion that I have. And so that's why I do what I do, right? Really in the long run. And I was scared to start. I didn't think I wanted to ever have a podcast. And someone's like, the stuff that you share is amazing. You really need to share that and have a podcast. And it took a little convincing, right? But I think, like you said, if you're really looking at your message and why you want to share that message too, that helps you overcome being that introvert and scared to get out there in the world too.
Yeah. And I have to admit, I've been doing podcast interviews for over a dozen years. And last year we started our own podcast. It's the Podcast Interview Marketing Show, right? It's basically everything we've learned along the way and a lot of our great clients. And there was one, Melissa Ensminger, that I recently spoke to, and she was talking about the routines that you can go through to be confident, right? Calm those nerves beforehand. And you think about, basketball players before they take the free throw shot, or, golfers before they take their shot, they go through that routine. And there's things that you can do just to put yourself in the right headspace so that you have a great conversation there. And it's, if people say, well, I'm nervous about it, good. Right? That means you care about it.
Right.
I remember hearing a performer say the day that you're not nervous going on stage is the day that you don't deserve to be on stage anymore.
That's insightful. I think that's true too. You mentioned a few minutes ago too, having done like keynote speeches and, being in front of people. And I've done that a few times too. And I remember being very nervous about getting up on stage, being in front of a room of people and sharing, and what if I mess up or things like that too. But then I had to realize again, what I'm sharing is helpful for them. And I might make a mistake, but are they going to think negatively about me because I made a mistake? Like, do I think negatively about someone else when they make a mistake? No. So I think we judge ourselves more harshly, I think, than where, what people really do think of us, right? If we aren't perfect.
And I love that we can be who we are, because at the end of the day, marketing is supposed to be magnetic. And too many people forget that magnets attract the right thing and repel the wrong thing, right? So if somebody hears me on a podcast interview and they don't like me, that's fine, right? I'm not the best person for them, right? And I'm not going to change. And I don't want to attract them only for them to find out, 3 months into the engagement who I really am. No, this is who I am. Our company 22 great people, but they've got the same values, the same passion. And so I'd rather get that out early on, right? And if it doesn't resonate with you and your business and your goals, that's fine. But
Hmm.
if it does, it will attract people to you.
Hmm. Right. So I would love for you to touch on too, like, why is podcast guesting such an effective marketing strategy for introverts, and what success stories maybe can you share with, someone who was introverted who actually expanded their reach because of their guesting appearances?
Well, it's getting more and more powerful. And, by the time you hear this, there'll probably be other examples, but I want to share one with Carla. Carla is a executive coach. She is a MD, a PhD. She got totally burnt out on medicine and decided that she was going to start helping people that were in her shoes. So
Hmm.
she's not a big self-promoter, right? She loved being in the lab. She loved being in surgery. And so she started to go out on podcast interviews, and it was uncomfortable for her. But she got out there and started to talking about different things. And she also not only got exposure from that, but she wasn't really big in self-promotion on social media. But she
Hmm.
was able to take those interviews and slice them and dice them and make the little reels and the shorts. She didn't take any more of her time. Somebody else could do that and put it up on her LinkedIn. And she started to get engagement. She started to
Hmm.
get new followers from that. And she could look at the data and say, wow, people really engaged when I talk about this. And, this they didn't. So she used it as marketing for that, right?
Hmm.
Now she's being found on ChatGPT because as of a few weeks ago, if you go down to the bottom, click sources, and it will tell you where they're pulling it from. And by large, it's your website, your LinkedIn profile. If you've got a Wikipedia page, they'll pull from there. Everything else is long form collaborative content, right? There's another client that we worked with, and his name, and I don't have permission to say it, so I'm not going to say it, but he had a professional football player with the same name. And his
Mm.
business was the same name as a 90s movie. And
Mm.
as he said, he was like in the witness protection plan on the internet, right? And so I said, well, there's a couple things you can do. Change your name
Mm.
or change the name of your company. And I'm like, don't want to do either. Well, he started to go out there, Candy, and get the exposure on podcast interviews. And his whole idea there is that he wanted to expand his reach beyond where he was, right? His hometown. And he just wanted a handful of clients. Well,
Mhm.
not only did he get that handful of clients, but then he had a waiting list. And he thought, well, I can't just leave the people on the waiting list. Excuse me. So he started a mastermind. And fast forward a year, he had a mastermind, 5
Mm.
groups with 10 paying people in each one, right? He was number 1 for his name, had outranked the football player, and his company had outranked that 90s movie. And it
Mm.
wasn't anything fancy with SEO or tricks. No, it's just hard work of getting out there. And that's one of the things I love about podcasting is anybody can do it from anywhere.
Mhm. That's so true. Like, do you have recommendations on how, as introverts, if they want to guest on shows, that they can reach out to those ideal shows to be on, and how they can connect with them and build that relationship and find, that is the right fit for them?
Yeah, and I wish people would learn from this more the extroverts than the introverts, because the introverts know it's about relationships. So, Gary Vaynerchuk talks about jab, 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 right hook. Probably missed a
Mm.
couple jabs. I was looking at it as give, 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 ask, right?
Mm.
So put yourself in the host's shoes, right? There's 3 types of people they want to have on their podcast. And can you tell me if I'm right on this? They're friends, friends of friends, and people they want to be their friends, right?
Mm.
No spammy pitches in there.
Right. Mhm.
So going back to the give, then ask, find the podcast, find 5 that you think would be great for you. Listen to them, right?
Mm.
Give them a rating and review. podcasters listen for that, right? We all are vain, right? We all look for that. Share it on their social media, right? Make a comment, share it, right? They'll know who you are. Then you can reach out and say, I've listened to the podcast and I think that I could bring value to your audience. They'll be asking you to be on the podcast.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice too, because, as podcasters, we do invest a lot of time in the show and finding the right, people to be on there to share their wisdom, because again, I want to educate my clients and have, helpful tips that they can implement, and make it important, make it effective for their own businesses too. But I want to know that people are actually listening, they're getting value from it too. And so I do appreciate when someone, like they said, leaves a review and says, I really, found this helpful and this is what it did for my business, or just, commenting on social media when they see an episode, or, oh, I really found this insightful. Like, it does give me more encouragement that yes, it does make a difference. It's not that I'm just putting content out there and nobody's paying attention to it. So I think just that alone right there that you commented on would definitely get attention. And then when they do reach out and like, I found, your episode, I listened to these shows. I thought they were great. This is why I think I can make, important contribution. That definitely would get my attention as well, instead of just those emails that just say, I'm the greatest person in the world and I should be on your show,
There's a platform out there now that their whole thing is, you can send 1,000 pitches in the time it take you to send one. And it's like, more is not better. Better is better. And that's why I tell people, find 5, right? If you do a good job on those shows, podcasters know podcasters. And so at the end, you can say, if I did a good job, if you like this, do you know anybody else that I could bring value to, right? And if every podcaster gives you 2 leads or 2 introductions, man, you'll be filled up, right? Whereas the flip side is, if you send 10,000 emails, spam emails, will you get some invites? Probably, right? Are they shows you're going to want to be on? No, not at all.
So true. Well, I know this has been very interesting, but we are coming to the end of the time that we have together today. So I wanted to ask if you have an offer that you would like to extend to our listeners, and also how can they connect with you if they want more information?
Yeah. And so this is the best practice, right? Pulling behind the curtain. When you're at the end of a podcast, give them one place to go and then meet them where they are, right? Give them 3 ways to say yes. So if you'd like to learn more, you just go back to interviewvalet with a v.com/bizhelp, BIZHELP. And everything Candy and I'll talk about would be there. And there's a few things. One is a new guide we put together, the ultimate guide for introverts on podcast interviews, right? It'll give you all the tips, the tricks, help you get the better results from that. The second one, Candy mentioned my book. You can buy it on Amazon, or if you want a free copy, just go back there. And then finally, if you listen to this and say, wow, I'd like to talk with you to see how I could use this to grow my business, how I could use podcast interview marketing to grow my brand. Well, I'll put all of that back on that page, interviewvalet.com/bizhelp.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Tom, for being a guest on my show and talking on this topic. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Candy.
And to the listener, if you enjoyed today's topic and you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.